I saved $140,000 for my dream wedding, but my parents lied about a medical emergency and used it all to fund my brother's lavish honeymoon. Hello, so I, 26F, recently married my hubby, 26M, following a 6-year romance. We arranged a private ceremony at his aunt's farmhouse, which was not what we had intended at first. I had wanted to marry on the beach because it was where we had some of our happiest moments. My husband and I are both water lovers, and we would go to the beach at least once a month to relax and decompress. So it is a particular place for us. I had already begun searching for places where we could all stay. Like every other bride on the planet, I wanted my wedding to be memorable. I had been saving for a big celebration for the past 5 years. I work in advertising and make a decent living. However, my husband and I lived cheaply and tried to save money for the future. We had planned to hire one of the top hotels with a sea view so that our guests could have a great experience. It was supposed to be a luxury experience, but we had to adjust our plans and cut back significantly because my parents decided to borrow money from me a few months ago. I could not force myself to decline. Some context. My brother, 24 million, got married a few months ago. However, his wedding was unexpected, and they had little time to plan. He had been with his wife for roughly 2 years and proposed about a month before they married. It was a tiny ceremony with only family and a few friends. But I was thrilled for him because it was their wedding and their decision. However, a few weeks after his wedding, my mother contacted me and requested that I borrow $125,000. She told me that my father had suddenly become ill. She claimed it was probably his diabetes acting up again, but she couldn't afford all of the medical bills alone and needed my assistance. She stated that the doctors had recommended a specialized medicine, but it was too expensive because it had to be imported. Their insurance wouldn't cover it, and she couldn't afford it. I was quite concerned about my father's health, so I decided to stand up and lend her the money, no questions asked. The lies began. I visited them a few times and begged my mother to show me the medical papers, but she always managed to avoid my questions. When I visited, my father was always in bed. However, for some reason, he did not appear to be really sick. Even when I asked my mother why he hadn't been taken to a hospital for observation and expert treatment, she said it wasn't required just now. But he was unwell enough to require an unusual prescription that wasn't even manufactured here and wasn't covered by their insurance. I am not an idiot. After the first few encounters, I realized there was something strange going on with my folks. But I didn't want to accuse them of anything until I was really certain. It would be a bad image if I accused them of lying about a medical emergency in order to borrow money, only to find out later that it was real. The big revelation. I quickly discovered that my brother had not been visiting our parents. Even when I asked why, my father said they didn't want him to worry. Because he was so young, they wanted him to concentrate on his work. They were absolutely cool with me being worried sick. After a few weeks had gone and my brother had not visited, I decided to phone him. I asked when he was going to stop by to see our father. That's when he casually mentioned that he'd pay me a visit as soon as he returned from his honeymoon. That was news to me. I had no idea he had left for his honeymoon because my parents had not informed me. I had no idea where he was because neither he nor his wife had posted anything about it on social media. When I inquired why he hadn't told me, he explained that he had planned to surprise everyone by returning after a month away with a collection of images, tales, and recollections from their tour around Europe. He stated that he had no intention of notifying me, but he was concerned when I mentioned that our father was sick, so he felt compelled to respond. He told me that after receiving my concerned text, he spoke with our parents, who assured him that there was nothing to worry about and that they were okay. He explained that our parents had most likely exaggerated the scenario while talking to me, and I had believed them because I was neurotic, resulting in a misunderstanding. I tried to give my parents the benefit of the doubt, believing that they had been keeping the truth from my brother because they didn't want to ruin his honeymoon or make him worry about them. I knew what I had seen in my parents' house, and there was no room for misunderstanding. But then my brother told me that if what I had predicted about Dad being terribly sick had come true, he would have felt terrible about not being there for him. Apparently, our parents paid for his excessively expensive and lengthy honeymoon. All of the danger bells went up in my head, so I asked him how much this trip would cost him. Then he told me that this trip would cost our parents at least $135,000 because he and his wife were going all out for their honeymoon, staying in the most costly hotels and eating at the best restaurants, because they could only do it once. They would also be shopping for a lot of things, and our parents would cover the cost. I realized right away that this was where my money was going and there was no medical emergency at all. There had never been an emergency, so they had no documentation to show me and had never even been to the hospital. My parents had merely made up the entire narrative in order to raise funds for my brother's honeymoon, which was meant to be their wedding gift. I felt incredibly insulted hearing my brother speak about how our parents went above and beyond for him just so the two of them could enjoy their honeymoon because they hadn't been able to have a lavish wedding. The money I had lent to my parents came from my wedding fund, and I felt as if I had been stabbed in the back when I discovered that my parents had handed it all to my brother. When I challenged them after that phone call, my parents informed me that they had to make up a tale because they knew I would not give them the money if I knew it would be spent for my brother's honeymoon. They told me he had been suffering at work and feeling unhappy for a long time, so they wanted him to have some fun without worrying about money. Unfortunately, they were unable to fund it themselves because it would jeopardize their own retirement fund, so they had to borrow money from me. Their reasoning was that I was still young and earning, and I had many years ahead of me to work and recoup this money, but it was not the same for them. They also stated that it was merely money, which they will refund at some point. But, for the time being, I needed to put myself second and consider my brother's sentiments, as this honeymoon appeared to have reinvigorated him and saved him from depression. I couldn't believe it, because it meant I'd have to cut back on my wedding spending for no apparent reason. To be clear, I was fine with having a smaller wedding if it meant my father's health didn't suffer. But this was not what I had signed up for. I was upset when they told me the truth, and I demanded that they repay me before I married because I intended to use the money for my wedding. I had a lot of expenses to consider if I wanted to go forward with a beach wedding. Even though my husband and his family were covering part of the expenses, I needed to look after myself as well. My parents had never planned to pay for the wedding since they had informed me very early on that they could either pay for my college education or pay for when I married, but not both. I had planned to go to college and pay for my own wedding, so I had been saving up for it alone. In case any of you are wondering, when my brother entered college, I asked him whether my parents had forced him to choose between these two as well, and he laughed in my face as if it was the most absurd concept ever. I never brought it up with my parents because I didn't want to accuse them of having a favorite, even though it was obvious that they did. But I was young and still needed their assistance because I couldn't find work at the time. So bringing these issues up and battling with them will simply exacerbate the situation for me. It didn't make sense to confront them about this. However, it came out several years later when I confronted them about the money they had stolen from me and how they had always preferred my brother over me. They attempted to deny it, but it was as obvious as day. I told them they had to repay me because I was not going to give up my ideal wedding just because my brother was struggling at work. My parents could mollycoddle him by sending him on an extravagant vacation with their own money, but I hadn't worked hard for 5 years and saved enough for my wedding simply to have that amount taken away from me and given to my brother. But they told me that they couldn't refund the money to me all at once before the wedding, and that it would take them a few years to do so. They expected me to be fine with it since, evidently, nothing is more important than family. If I was willing to spend that money on a medical emergency for my father, there was no reason why I couldn't use it to save my brother from falling into depression. But here's the thing, my brother would never be depressed because of his job, since he never took it seriously, which is why he was awful at it and earned so little. He works in sales, and practically all of his money comes from commissions. So, if he's bad at what he does, he only has himself to blame. He might have been upset about it, but I can assure you that he was never going to get despondent. He simply didn't care enough about anything because he had been spoiled by my parents his entire life and was unaccustomed to working hard for things, which is why he appeared dissatisfied with his job. That's all it was. However, my parents exaggerated the situation to make it appear that he was worried by his work failures and needed to be rescued. It was all a bunch of nonsense. I attempted to tell my parents how important this wedding was to me. I had previously promised my husband and his family that I would cover certain expenses, which would be difficult if I didn't have the money, therefore they needed to take action. But they said they couldn't refund the money to me before I got married, so I'd have to scale back or ask my spouse and his family for help. It got to the point where I begged them to return my money. But all they did was shake their heads and say no, promising to return it someday but not before the wedding. I left their house crying, and when I returned home and informed my husband what had happened, he was just as angry and even more unhappy as I was. He was planning to contact a lawyer, but I told him there was no point because there was no written confirmation that my mother wanted the money for medical reasons or that she intended to return it to me. It had all been informal, with no binding contracts or documentation to substantiate a single point. So, even if we did file a case against her, we would be wasting more of our money by hiring for a lawyer because we would most likely be unable to establish anything because we did not have any messages in our favor. Everything had been verbal and off the record, so as much as we wanted to pursue my parents, we decided against it because it would be fruitless, and we didn't want to waste any more of our money on a hopeless scenario. Instead, we decided to start thinking about how we would adjust our wedding plans. Thankfully, my husband's family stepped in when they discovered what my parents had done. His aunt agreed to let us use her farmhouse venue for free. We'd always wanted to have a beach wedding, but his aunt hadn't recommended it at first. But now that we're looking at other options, she offered that idea, and I decided to check it out. My husband had visited the location before, but the moment I walked in, I knew it was the one. It was a wonderful location, and even though it was not near the ocean, my husband and I were delighted. His aunt was allowing us to use the venue for free, which gave us even more motivation to start planning around the farmhouse instead. I became preoccupied with wedding preparations, which gave me yet another reason to distance myself from my parents. I had already decided that they were not going to be invited to my wedding. But I was on the fence regarding my brother because he hadn't done anything wrong and didn't realize my parents had taken the money from me to give it to him. However, he made the decision much simpler for me by calling me after he returned from his honeymoon and berating me for humiliating our parents by requesting that they return my money. He told me that he had heard what had happened from our mother and was angry that I was being so difficult about it. Apparently, he thought this was no great thing, despite the fact that he had spent my money, and promised to return it to me as soon as he could. But I had to suck it up before the wedding and scale back. So that's when I decided how I felt about him, and I didn't speak to any of them after that. Now that I didn't have the complete wedding fund, I couldn't afford a lavish, extravagant wedding. To be honest, I believe it worked for me because the wedding I did have was far more lovely than anything I had envisioned previously. We had to reduce our expectations, but it was worthwhile since we realized that this day was supposed to be about us. We were not the individuals we were attempting to portray in our daily lives, so spending a fortune on a big wedding solely to impress people would be incredibly shallow. We decided to cut the wedding costs and instead do something better with the money we saved. In a way, I'm grateful for how things turned out since my wedding was still lovely and wonderful, but it lacked the pomp and show that I had envisioned previously. It was a good thing since we were only surrounded by people we loved and who loved us when we came together to celebrate. I believe that is pretty much all you need for a wedding, so I'm pleased with how things turned out. I posted images from my wedding a few days ago. Everyone in my family who had been invited to the wedding had been given strong and precise instructions to ensure that my parents and brother did not find out that the invites had already been sent. If they found out, they'd throw a fit since they didn't get one, which is how we were able to have a private ceremony without them coming up or attempting to coerce me into inviting them before the wedding. But now that it was finished and everything had gone smoothly, I didn't see anything wrong with sharing the images on social media. However, they discovered it and contacted me the next day, demanding an explanation for why they had not been invited to my wedding. I was surprised that they expected to be invited, given that my previous conversation with any of them had not been good. I had been crying as I left my parents' house after our previous quarrel, and we hadn't spoken since. The last time I spoke with my brother, he made me feel like everything was my fault and that I was the one who was being theatrical. After that, I hadn't spoken to any of them, and they hadn't attempted to speak with me either. So I wasn't sure why they had expected to be welcomed. They had not only expected me to invite them, but they were also disappointed that they were unable to attend the wedding. My parents called me first, then joined my brother to the call so they could all yell at me at the same time. But I didn't like it, and it seemed extremely entitled of them. I'd already cut them out of my life, and I didn't need any more turmoil while trying to enjoy my new life as a bride, so I told them that after they took my money, I needed to lower the wedding budget. I decided to invite only family and a few close friends, and because they were neither, they were not included. After that, I hung up and blocked them, hoping they would leave me alone. But an hour later, my husband told me that my brother had contacted him to notify us that my parents had been deeply offended by what I had said. My mother was upset, so she kept crying until she almost fainted. That was all he said, but I began to feel guilty because I hadn't meant to offend my parents so deeply. He could be bluffing, but I'm not sure, and hearing this has made me feel strangely bad. AITA for not inviting my parents and brother to my wedding after they stole money from my wedding fund. Update 1. Hello, it's been a week since my last chat with my parents and brother, and I've chosen not to speak to them again. My mother can cry all she wants, but it won't change the facts. I was crying so hard the day I confronted them about the money, and I even begged them to return it to me before the wedding, but they didn't seem to care. They had taken it quite lightly, and now I was going to do the same to them. You reap what you sow. I also warned my brother not to contact me or my husband, particularly my husband, because he had nothing to do with any of this, and I didn't want my family bothering him with their petty antics. I banned him again after that text since I didn't want my family to have any contact with me. They had mistreated me my entire life, and now I was not going to take it anymore. I vowed that if I could, I would file a lawsuit against them to recover my money. However, given the lack of actual evidence, that may be a long shot at the moment. My husband feels it's worth a shot and might just work, so we've been thinking about it. He has spoken with a reputable lawyer, and we will decide what to do in a few days. Until then, I just need to figure out how to get them to confess or admit that they borrowed the money from me under the pretense of using it for a medical emergency, but then gave it to my brother so he could have a fun honeymoon. It will be difficult to prove in court, but I refuse to let them off the hook so easy. I deserve to have my money returned to me, and I will do everything it takes to ensure that they do, and that they do it as soon as possible. Update 2. Yesterday, I warned my brother not to worry my husband with our family drama, so he apparently interpreted it as a sign to pull him into this, despite the fact that he is not involved. After we arrived home from work, my husband informed me that my parents and brother had sent him a slew of SMS, demanding that he speak with me and instruct me to unblock them. When he blocked them, they decided to escalate the situation by showing up at his workplace. Apparently, they had been waiting for him outside, and as soon as they saw his car go, they began tailing him and honking at him. So he had to stop and wait for them to catch up because he recognized my brother's car and knew it was them. He also knew that if he didn't stop and wait for them, they'd just follow him home, which would greatly disturb me. So he decided to take one for the team and indulge their nonsense. When he pulled over, my brother exited his car, approached his window, and stated that they wanted to meet with him in person. There was a diner nearby, and my spouse was eager to get it over with. They took a booth in the diner so that my family could express whatever they felt was so vital. My brother informed him that he didn't think it was fair for me to cut everyone off over money, and that it was an overreaction. They also thought my implication that we were no longer family because they had borrowed money from me went too far. I'd previously blocked them, so they couldn't contact me, but they knew that if my husband tried to chat with me, I might just listen. So they were attempting to appeal to him, and my husband could remind me that we were a family regardless, so I needed to act like it rather than throwing tantrums over minor misunderstandings and acting like a brat. My parents also stated that they intended to repay the money to me later, but they were unable to do so all at once. They'd already stated it to me 1,000,000 times, so I needed to be more considerate because my brother was suffering at work and my parents were due to retire in a few years. They were attempting to persuade my husband that this was entirely my fault and that I was acting out for no reason. But my husband handled it very effectively, and rather than putting them in their place, he entertained them and made them feel like he was on their side. He told them that while he could try to explain it to me, it would be far more helpful if they came out to me personally and wrote me a meaningful note. So far, they had only been accusatory against me, but my husband persuaded them that if they admitted their mistakes, it would calm me down. And those idiots actually purchased it. My spouse tricked them into sending me a message in which they admitted what they had done, leading them to assume that this would make me easy on them. They assumed I would eventually apologize to them since tone was everything. It's all nonsense, of course, since the moment they send that communication, we treat it as an admission of guilt and pursue them criminally. I am actually very pleased with my husband since he handled this far better than I would have, and I believe he is an evil genius. But he's my evil genius, and I adore him. Update 3. My husband's strategy worked, and we are quite excited right now. My dad and brother, like a bunch of fools, sent me an email listing every single lie they had lied and admitting to everything they had done. So, now that we have documentation, my husband has granted our lawyer permission to proceed with a petition, and we will soon receive our money back. $125,000 may not seem like much to other people, but it means a lot to me because I've spent the previous 5 years trying to save for the future and worked really hard to get where I am now. It took a lot of late hours and sacrifices, and I'm not going to let it all go to waste just because my brother is lazy and my parents want to help him. So we will sue them, and whatever it takes, we will get my money back. We've already begun arranging our honeymoon, which will be a brief vacation to the beach because that's where it all began and will always be precious to us. We might take a longer break in a couple of months and treat it like a vacation, but for the time being, this will have to suffice. We know we don't need to impress people or spend a lot of money. We can do whatever makes us happy, and we are doing just that. Also, I don't want to be like my brother, who shared images from his honeymoon after they returned just to stick it in people's faces. But now he's going to be sued for just that. It's incredibly awful for them, but they brought it on themselves, so they completely deserve whatever comes their way. I refused to wax a trans woman client because I didn't want to touch male genitalia out of respect for my husband. My name is Sarah, and I am a 34-year-old licensed esthetician. From a young age, I was fascinated by the beauty industry and the way it could transform not only a person's appearance, but also their confidence. My journey into this field began in my late teens when I started working at a local spa. It was there that I discovered my passion for skincare and waxing, which eventually led me to pursue formal training and certification as an esthetician. Over the years, I honed my skills and built a reputation for being meticulous, compassionate, and dedicated to my clients' well-being. After gaining significant experience and saving up enough money, I decided to take the plunge and open my own small waxing salon. It was a dream come true, and I poured my heart and soul into creating a space that felt welcoming and safe for everyone who walked through the door. I named it Glow and Smooth, and it quickly became known for its serene atmosphere and exceptional service. My goal was always to ensure that my clients felt comfortable and cared for, no matter their background or needs. Glow and Smooth is more than just a business to me. It's a reflection of my commitment to providing a sanctuary where people can come to feel rejuvenated and confident in their skin. I meticulously designed the salon to have a calming ambiance, with soft lighting, soothing music, and a clean, inviting decor. Every detail, from the choice of high-quality products to the personalized service, was thoughtfully curated to enhance the client experience. I take pride in the fact that many of my clients have been with me since the beginning, and they often tell me how much they appreciate the tranquil and respectful environment I have created. Running my own small waxing salon, Glow and Smooth, involves more than just performing services. It also requires meticulous organization and preparation for each client. My booking process is straightforward yet thorough, designed to ensure that every client receives the highest level of care and attention. Clients book their appointments through an online system that asks for essential information, including the type of service they require and any specific needs or concerns they might have. This system helps me prepare for each session, allowing me to tailor my approach to meet individual preferences and ensure a comfortable experience. I review the appointment schedule daily, making notes on each client's preferences and any special instructions they may have provided. One day, I received a booking from a new client named Alex for a full Brazilian wax. The appointment was set for the following week, giving me ample time to prepare. As with all new clients, I reviewed Alex's information in detail. The form was filled out correctly, and there were no specific notes or concerns mentioned. I made sure to have all the necessary supplies ready and to set up the room in a way that would be welcoming and comfortable. When the day of the appointment arrived, I went through my usual routine of sanitizing the room, arranging my tools, and ensuring that the atmosphere was calming and inviting. I have always believed that the environment plays a significant role in the client's overall experience, and I strive to make every visit to Glow and Smooth as pleasant and relaxing as possible. As the appointment time approached, I heard the soft chime of the doorbell, signaling Alex's arrival. I greeted her with a warm smile, inviting her into the reception area. My initial impression of Alex was positive. She seemed friendly and somewhat nervous, a common reaction for clients coming in for an intimate waxing service. I introduced myself and guided her to the treatment room, making small talk to help her feel more at ease. Once we were in the room, I began our usual pre-service consultation. This is a crucial part of the process, as it allows me to understand the client's needs and address any concerns they might have. I explained the procedure in detail, including the steps I would take to ensure her comfort and safety. As we talked, it became clear to me that Alex was a trans woman. This realization brought a wave of internal conflict, as I was reminded of the personal boundaries I had set for myself and the agreement I had with my husband. Mark and I had established certain boundaries early in our relationship to ensure mutual respect and comfort. One of these boundaries was that I would only perform intimate waxing services on biological women with female genitalia. This decision was based on our personal values and the need to maintain trust and respect in our marriage. While I have always been a strong supporter of the LGBTQ+ community, I felt that this boundary was necessary to respect both my own comfort levels and my husband's feelings. I found myself in a difficult position. On one hand, I wanted to provide Alex with the same care and respect that I offered all my clients. On the other hand, I felt a deep sense of obligation to adhere to the boundaries and agreements that had been a cornerstone of my marriage. The internal struggle was intense, and I knew I had to handle the situation with sensitivity and honesty. Taking a deep breath, I gently explained to Alex that while I fully supported her and the LGBTQ+ community, I had personal boundaries that I needed to respect. I told her about the agreement I had with my husband and how it related to my practice. I assured her that my refusal was not out of discrimination or transphobia, but rather a matter of personal comfort and maintaining the integrity of my relationship. Alex listened quietly, her expression shifting from confusion to disappointment. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it pained me to know that I was the cause. I continued to explain that I specialized in waxing biological women and did not have the necessary experience to ensure her safety and comfort. I offered to help her find another professional who was experienced in providing waxing services for trans clients, hoping to alleviate some of her frustration. Despite my efforts to explain and offer assistance, Alex was understandably upset. She accused me of discrimination and stormed out of the salon, leaving me standing there, feeling a mix of guilt and sadness. I had always prided myself on providing a safe and inclusive environment for all my clients, and this incident left me questioning whether I had done the right thing. The moment Alex stormed out of my salon, I felt an immediate pang of guilt and doubt. Her accusations of discrimination echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the image of her disappointed and hurt expression. I had always prided myself on providing a safe, inclusive and welcoming environment at Glow and Smooth. And now it felt like all of that had been called into question. As I stood alone in the treatment room, my mind raced with thoughts of whether I had made the right decision and what the repercussions would be. In the hours that followed, I found it hard to concentrate on my work. The incident with Alex weighed heavily on my conscience, making it difficult to focus on my other clients. Each time the doorbell chimed, signaling a new appointment, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety, wondering if the next person coming in had already heard about what happened. By the end of the day, word had indeed started to spread. In the age of social media and instant communication, it didn't take long for news of the incident to reach the wider community. I began receiving messages and comments online, some supportive and understanding, others harsh and critical. It was overwhelming, and I felt a mix of emotions, defensiveness, regret, and a desire to explain my side of the story. The feedback was mixed to say the least. Some people reached out to express their support, emphasizing the importance of personal boundaries and understanding the context of my decision. They appreciated my honesty and the fact that I had tried to handle the situation with as much sensitivity as possible. These messages provided some comfort and reassurance during a very turbulent time. On the other hand, there were many who were not so forgiving. I received several harsh messages accusing me of being transphobic and discriminatory. Some people vowed never to visit my salon again, while others went as far as leaving negative reviews online. It was disheartening to see my business, which I had worked so hard to build, being attacked in such a public way. I felt a deep sense of failure, as if I had let down not only Alex but the entire community I had always aimed to support. A few clients canceled their upcoming appointments, citing the incident as their reason. It was painful to see loyal customers turn away, and it made me question my actions even more. I started to worry about the long-term impact this would have on my business, and whether I would be able to recover from this blow. Despite the support, the negative feedback continued to weigh heavily on me. I found myself replaying the incident in my mind, questioning every decision and wondering if there was a better way I could have handled it. The guilt was compounded by the realization that I had inadvertently hurt someone who was simply seeking a service and a sense of acceptance. 2 weeks had passed since the incident with Alex and the fallout that followed. The once vibrant and bustling atmosphere at Glow and Smooth had noticeably dimmed. The salon, which had been a sanctuary of calm and comfort for so many clients, now felt like a shadow of its former self. The backlash from the community had been swift and severe, and I was left grappling with the consequences of my actions. Every morning, I opened the doors of Glow and Smooth, hoping for a return to normalcy, but the reality was stark. The usual steady stream of clients had dwindled to a trickle. Regulars who had once been loyal to my business were now hesitant, their trust shaken by the incident. New appointments were rare, and cancellations had become all too common. The salon, which had once been filled with the soothing hum of conversation and laughter, now echoed with an unsettling silence. The financial impact was immediate and harsh. With fewer clients coming in, my revenue had taken a significant hit. The bills and expenses of running a business didn't pause, and I found myself dipping into my savings to keep things afloat. The stress of the situation weighed heavily on me, affecting not only my professional life but also my personal well-being. Sleepless nights became the norm as I lay awake, replaying the incident over and over in my mind, questioning every decision I had made. I couldn't help but wonder if I had indeed lacked professionalism in handling the situation with Alex. My intentions were never to discriminate or make anyone feel unwelcome. I had tried to explain my personal boundaries and the agreement I had with my husband, but in the heat of the moment, it seemed my words had only caused more harm. Was it unprofessional to let my personal values influence my business decisions so heavily? This question haunted me constantly. The mixed feedback I received from the community only added to my confusion. Some clients and friends had reached out with words of support, emphasizing the importance of respecting personal boundaries and understanding the context of my actions. They appreciated my honesty and the attempt to handle the situation with sensitivity. However, others were not so forgiving. Accusations of transphobia and discrimination were leveled against me, tarnishing the reputation I had worked so hard to build. I sought solace in conversations with my husband, Mark, who remained steadfastly supportive. He understood the complex emotions I was grappling with and tried to reassure me that standing by our values was the right thing to do. But even his unwavering support couldn't entirely ease the burden of guilt and doubt I carried. In an attempt to navigate the fallout, I reached out to other professionals in the beauty industry, seeking their advice and experiences. Some shared similar challenges they had faced and offered guidance on how to move forward. They emphasized the importance of empathy, communication, and the need to continually evolve to better serve a diverse clientele. Their insights were valuable, but I still struggled to reconcile my personal values with the professional demands of inclusivity. I also contacted LGBTQ+ advocacy groups, hoping to gain a deeper understanding of how to create a truly inclusive environment at Glow and Smooth. These conversations were enlightening and humbling. I realized that while my intentions were never to discriminate, the impact of my actions had been profoundly felt by Alex and potentially others in the community. I learned about the specific needs and concerns of trans clients and how I could better accommodate them in the future. Despite these efforts, the path forward remained unclear. The immediate crisis had subsided, but the long-term implications were daunting. My confidence in my ability to manage the salon and provide a welcoming space for all clients was shaken. The once clear vision I had for Glow and Smooth was now clouded by uncertainty and self-doubt. As I stood in the empty salon, I felt a deep sense of loss. The dream I had worked so hard to achieve seemed to be slipping away, and I was unsure how to reclaim it. I knew that I needed to find a way to balance my personal boundaries with the professional responsibility of inclusivity, but the journey to get there seemed fraught with challenges. The incident with Alex had been a wake-up call, forcing me to confront my own beliefs and the impact they had on others. It had also revealed the fragile nature of trust and reputation in the business world. Moving forward, I was determined to rebuild and learn from this experience, but the road ahead was undeniably steep and uncertain. The lessons from this painful chapter would shape not only my business practices but also my understanding of empathy and inclusivity in a diverse and ever-evolving community. My pregnant daughter is about to marry an incarcerated man. How do I deal with this situation while being estranged by my daughter? My name is Evelyn, and I am 47 years old. I have always considered myself a devoted mother, one who would do anything to ensure the happiness and well-being of her children. My life has been a tapestry of joys and challenges, woven with the threads of my family's journey. I have 2 children, my eldest Natalie, who is 22, and my son Daniel, who is 18. This story, however, revolves around Natalie, my brilliant, beautiful, and headstrong daughter, who has always been the apple of my eye. Natalie has always been a remarkable young woman. From a very young age, she exhibited an intelligence and determination that set her apart from her peers. She excelled academically, earning top grades in school and winning numerous awards. Her passion for learning and helping others led her to pursue a career in dentistry. I remember the pride swelling in my chest when she graduated from high school with honors. Her future seemed so bright and full of promise. After high school, Natalie went on to college, where she continued to shine. She graduated with an associate's degree in dental hygiene and was subsequently accepted into a prestigious dental school. Her acceptance was a testament to her hard work and dedication. As a mother, I couldn't have been prouder. Natalie had everything going for her: a bright future, a loving family, and a supportive partner. Natalie's personal life also seemed to be on a positive trajectory. She had been in a steady and healthy relationship with her high school sweetheart Mark. Mark was a kind and responsible young man who adored Natalie. They met during their senior year of high school and quickly became inseparable. Their relationship blossomed over the years, and they supported each other through the ups and downs of young adulthood. I saw in Mark the qualities of a devoted partner and a good father. About a year ago, Natalie and Mark welcomed their first child into the world, a beautiful baby boy named Oliver. Watching Natalie become a mother was one of the most profound experiences of my life. She embraced motherhood with grace and dedication, balancing her studies and her new responsibilities with remarkable poise. Mark was equally committed, proving himself to be a loving and attentive father. Their little family seemed perfect, and they even got engaged 6 months ago, planning to marry after Natalie finished her dental studies. However, life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. Around the same time Natalie and Mark got engaged, she began a peculiar new hobby: writing letters to prisoners. Initially, I was uncomfortable with the idea. The notion of my daughter communicating with inmates was unsettling, to say the least. But Natalie assured me it was merely a way to offer companionship to those who were lonely and forgotten by society. She believed everyone deserved a second chance and wanted to make a difference, even if it was just through words on paper. Natalie explained the Pen Pal program to me over dinner one evening. She was animated and enthusiastic, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of doing something meaningful. "Mom, these people are human too. They've made mistakes, but they deserve a second chance, a little bit of hope," she said. I nodded, admiring her compassion but feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Writing to prisoners was not something I had ever considered, and it seemed fraught with potential dangers. Initially, I tried to dissuade her. Natalie, are you sure this is safe? You don't know these people, and prisons are filled with individuals who have committed serious crimes, I cautioned. But she was resolute. I'll be careful, Mom. I'll use a P.O. box, and I won't give out any personal information. It's just letters. What harm could it do? Seeing her determination, I reluctantly agreed, on the condition that she use a P.O. box for all correspondence. I rented one for her myself, hoping this small precaution would provide a buffer between her and any potential danger. As the weeks turned into months, I watched her immerse herself in this new activity. She would often sit at the kitchen table, surrounded by stationery, writing long, heartfelt letters. Her dedication was touching, and despite my reservations, I couldn't help but feel proud of her for wanting to make a difference. One name began to come up more frequently in our conversations. Jacob. At first it was just in passing. Jacob wrote me the most beautiful letter today. He's so articulate and thoughtful, she would say. Gradually he became a central figure in her letters. She would read me excerpts from his responses, and I could see why she was drawn to him. He wrote with a sensitivity and depth that were unexpected from someone in his circumstances. He spoke of regret, redemption, and hope for a better future. Still, I couldn't shake my unease. As time went on, I noticed a shift in Natalie. She started talking about Jacob not just as a pen pal but as someone who had become important to her. Mom, Jacob's different. He's not like the others. He's intelligent, kind, and he understands me in a way no one else does, she said one evening, her voice filled with conviction. I could see the spark in her eyes, the same one I had seen when she talked about Mark in the early days of their relationship. It was then that I began to worry that this was more than just a pen pal friendship. My worst fears were confirmed one Sunday afternoon. Natalie had been unusually quiet all morning, and I could tell something was on her mind. We were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm sunshine, when she turned to me and said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." Her tone was serious, and I felt a pang of anxiety. "I'm in love with Jacob," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've been writing to each other for almost 8 months, and I've fallen for him. He's everything I've ever wanted in a partner. He makes me feel special and understood." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, unable to speak, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could this be happening? My daughter, who had so much going for her, was in love with a man behind bars. "Natalie, this is crazy, you don't even know him. He's in prison for a reason," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. But she was resolute. "I do know him, Mom. We've shared so much with each other through our letters. He's made mistakes, yes, but he's changed. He's not the same person he was when he went in." We argued for hours that day, each of us standing our ground. I tried to make her see reason, to understand the dangers and the potential heartbreak she was inviting into her life. But she was adamant. "You don't understand, Mom. You've never felt what I feel for him. He's my soulmate," she said, tears streaming down her face. In the following weeks, I tried to come to terms with the situation. I wanted to believe that Natalie was just going through a phase, that she would eventually see the futility and danger of her actions. But instead, she became more entrenched in her relationship with Jacob. She started visiting him regularly, taking Oliver with her. The thought of my grandson being exposed to such an environment made me sick with worry. One evening, she showed me photos from her visits. There they were, smiling and embracing, Jacob holding Oliver as if he were his own. It was a surreal and heartbreaking sight. "Mom, he loves Oliver. He wants to be a father to him," she said, her voice filled with a hope that I found both touching and terrifying. Desperate to understand, I began to research Jacob's past. What I found only deepened my fear and anger. Jacob had a long criminal record, including charges of armed robbery and assault. He was serving a lengthy sentence for his crimes, and there was no guarantee he would be released anytime soon. The thought of my daughter and grandson being involved with someone so dangerous was unbearable. I confronted Natalie with what I had learned, hoping it would make her see reason. "Natalie, this man is dangerous. He has a history of violence. You can't risk your life and Oliver's life for someone like him," I pleaded. But she remained steadfast. "Mom, people can change. He's paid for his mistakes, and he's a different person now. Why can't you see that?" she responded, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and hurt. Our relationship became increasingly strained. We argued constantly, and every conversation seemed to end in tears and frustration. Natalie accused me of not trusting her judgment, of not understanding her love for Jacob. I, on the other hand, couldn't understand how she could be so blind to the risks and the potential for heartbreak. The tension between us grew, and I felt like I was losing her. The breaking point came when Natalie told me Jacob had proposed to her during one of her visits, and she had accepted. I was beyond shocked. You can't be serious, Natalie. You're going to marry a man who is in prison. What kind of life will that be for you and Oliver? I demanded, my voice rising with a mixture of anger and desperation. But she was determined. I love him, Mom. He's the one I want to be with, and we're going to make it work, she said, her face set with a resolve that both scared and saddened me. Our argument that day was the worst we had ever had. We both said things we regretted, and the rift between us widened. Natalie accused me of being controlling and unsupportive, and I, in turn, told her she was being naive and reckless. In the end, she stormed out of the house, vowing that she wouldn't let me stand in the way of her happiness. I was left standing there, feeling a profound sense of loss and helplessness. Since that day, Natalie has distanced herself from me. She moved out, taking Oliver with her, and cut off almost all communication. The pain of not seeing my daughter and grandson is a constant ache in my heart. I feel like I've lost her to a man I believe will bring nothing but pain and disappointment into her life. I lie awake at night, tormented by thoughts of what could happen to her and Oliver, and feeling utterly powerless to protect them. In the months that followed, I tried to find ways to bridge the gap between us. I sent letters, left messages, and even tried to reach out through mutual friends. But Natalie remained distant, unwilling to let me back into her life unless I accepted her relationship with Jacob. It was a price I couldn't pay, and the stalemate continued. As Natalie's relationship with Jacob deepened, my concerns grew exponentially. The thought of my daughter and grandson being involved with a man with such a dangerous past kept me up at night. My mind was a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. I could feel the tight-knit fabric of our family beginning to unravel, and I felt helpless to stop it. Our once peaceful household became a battleground of arguments and strained silences. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Every conversation with Natalie seemed to escalate into a heated dispute, leaving us both emotionally drained. I tried to be patient, to choose my words carefully, but my fear for her and Oliver's safety often got the better of me. Natalie, you have to think about Oliver. What kind of life will he have with Jacob in the picture? I pleaded one evening, my voice trembling with desperation. We were in the living room, and I could see the frustration building in her eyes. Mom, I am thinking about Oliver. Jacob loves him, and he wants to be a good father. He's changed. People can change, she responded, her tone edged with irritation. How can you be so sure? You've known him for less than a year, and most of that time he's been behind bars. You don't know what he's really like, I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. Why can't you just trust me, Mom? I'm not a child. I know what I'm doing, she shot back, her eyes flashing with defiance. The arguments would often end with Natalie storming out of the room, leaving me alone with my fears and doubts. I felt like I was losing her to a man I barely knew, and it broke my heart. The Natalie I knew was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who was willing to risk everything for a love I couldn't understand. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Natalie's ex-fiancé, Mark. Mark had been a part of our family for years, and his sudden departure from Natalie's life left a gaping hole. He was devastated by the breakup, and his pain mirrored my own. We often found ourselves confiding in each other, trying to make sense of the chaos that had upended our lives. Mark came over one evening, his face drawn and weary. We sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee and sharing our worries. I just don't understand it, Evelyn. We were happy. I thought we had a future together, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I know, Mark, I thought the same. This relationship with Jacob, it's tearing us all apart, I replied, my eyes welling up with tears. Mark nodded, his expression one of deep sorrow. I miss Oliver so much. I miss Natalie. It feels like I've lost my family, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I reached out and squeezed his hand, trying to offer some comfort. We'll get through this, Mark. We have to. For Oliver's sake, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The impact of Natalie's new relationship on our family was profound. Oliver, only a little over a year old, was caught in the middle of a situation he couldn't possibly understand. I worried about the stability and safety of his environment. Natalie's visits to the prison, taking Oliver with her, seemed reckless and irresponsible to me. I feared for his well-being and the kind of influence Jacob might have on him. My relationship with Natalie became increasingly strained. The more I tried to intervene, the more she pushed me away. She accused me of not respecting her decisions, of trying to control her life. It was a painful accusation, and it cut deeply. I had always prided myself on being a supportive and understanding mother, but this situation tested my limits. The breaking point came one afternoon when Natalie announced she was moving out. She couldn't stand the constant arguments and the atmosphere of disapproval. I need space, Mom. I can't live like this anymore. I need to do what's right for me and Oliver, she said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying sadness. Natalie, please. Don't do this. We can work it out. You don't have to leave. I begged, my heart breaking at the thought of her and Oliver moving out. I'm sorry, Mom, but I have to. I need to build a life with Jacob and I can't do that here, she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I watched helplessly as she packed her things and left, taking Oliver with her. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence a constant reminder of the fractured state of our family. I felt like I had failed her, failed to protect her and guide her through this tumultuous time. The weeks that followed were a blur of sorrow and worry. Natalie kept her distance, and my attempts to reach out were met with silence. Mark, too, was struggling to cope with the loss. He continued to visit, and we found solace in each other's company, trying to navigate the emotional minefield we were both trapped in. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically. Daniel, my younger son, was affected as well. He was close to Natalie and Oliver, and their absence weighed heavily on him. He struggled to understand why his sister had made such a drastic decision, and I found myself trying to reassure him even as I grappled with my own doubts. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Daniel broke the silence that had settled over the table. Mom, do you think Natalie will ever come back? He asked, his voice tinged with sadness. I hope so, Daniel. I really do. We just have to give her time and support her as best we can, I replied, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The strain of the situation took a toll on my health. I found it hard to sleep, my mind constantly racing with worries about Natalie and Oliver. I lost weight, and my energy levels plummeted. Friends and family noticed the change and expressed their concern, but I felt powerless to change the course of events. In the midst of this turmoil, I sought solace in my faith and in the support of close friends. I spent hours praying, hoping for some divine intervention that would bring my daughter back to me. I also leaned on my best friend, Susan, who had been a pillar of strength throughout this ordeal. Susan would visit regularly, offering a listening ear and words of comfort. Evelyn, you've done everything you can. Natalie knows you love her. She'll come around eventually, she would say, her voice filled with reassuring confidence. I hope you're right, Susan. I just feel so helpless. I want to protect her, but I don't know how, I would reply, my heart heavy with worry. Susan's words of comfort were a small beacon of hope in the midst of my despair. But as the days stretched into weeks, and then months, I found myself sinking deeper into a sense of hopelessness. Natalie remained resolute in her decision to marry Jacob, despite my best efforts to make her see reason. One afternoon, as I sat alone in my living room, the weight of my worry pressing down on me like a leaden blanket, the phone rang. It was Mark, Natalie's ex-fiancé. His voice was strained, filled with a mixture of anger and despair. Evelyn, have you seen the news? He asked, his words tumbling out in a rush. I felt a shiver of apprehension run down my spine. No, what's happened? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. It's Jacob. He's been arrested again, Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hardly believe it. How could things possibly get any worse? But as Mark filled me in on the details, my worst fears were confirmed. Jacob had been charged with a series of violent crimes, including assault and robbery. It was a devastating blow, one that sent shockwaves through our already fractured family. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could Natalie have been so blind to Jacob's true nature? How could she have put herself and Oliver in such danger? The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, and I struggled to contain my emotions. But amid the turmoil, there was a glimmer of hope. Mark and I had discussed the possibility of taking legal action to protect Natalie and Oliver from Jacob's influence, and now it seemed more urgent than ever. With Jacob behind bars, we had a window of opportunity to intervene, to ensure that Natalie and Oliver were kept safe from harm. I called Mark immediately, and we arranged to meet as soon as possible to discuss our next steps. Despite the pain and heartache of the past months, there was a sense of determination in my heart. I would do whatever it took to protect my daughter and grandson from further harm, even if it meant facing Jacob in court. As Mark arrived at my home, his face drawn and weary, I could see the weight of the world on his shoulders. We sat down together at the kitchen table, our minds racing with possibilities and uncertainties. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of solidarity, a shared commitment to do whatever was necessary to safeguard our family's future. I can't believe it's come to this, Mark said, his voice breaking with emotion. I never imagined things would end up like this. I know, Mark. But we have to stay strong for Natalie and Oliver. They need us now more than ever, I replied, my voice steady with resolve. We spent hours discussing our options, weighing the risks and benefits of each course of action. In the end, We agreed that taking Jacob to court was the best course of action. It was a daunting prospect, filled with uncertainty and potential backlash, but we knew it was the only way to ensure Natalie's safety and well-being. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared for the legal battle ahead. We consulted with lawyers, gathered evidence, and braced ourselves for the challenges that lay ahead. It was a daunting task, but knowing that we were fighting for Natalie and Oliver gave us the strength to persevere. As the news of our intentions to take Jacob to court reached Natalie, the fallout was swift and devastating. I received a barrage of angry messages and missed calls from her, each one more hostile than the last. My heart sank as I read her words, filled with venom and betrayal. How had it come to this? How had our efforts to protect her and Oliver been interpreted as an act of betrayal? The weight of Natalie's accusations bore down on me like a crushing weight, leaving me feeling more lost and helpless than ever before. I had hoped that our actions would be seen as a desperate attempt to keep her safe from harm, but instead, they had only served to further alienate us from her. In a moment of desperation, I tried to call her, to explain our reasoning and reassure her of our love and concern. But she rejected my calls, refusing to engage with me in any way. The rejection felt like a knife to the heart, leaving me feeling more alone and isolated than ever before. As the days passed, the silence from Natalie grew deafening. I longed to reach out to her, to mend the rift that had torn our family apart, but I didn't know where to begin. How could I bridge the gap between us when she refused to even acknowledge my existence? Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a text message from Natalie. My heart skipped a beat as I read her words, filled with anger and resentment. She cursed me in language that cut to the bone, accusing me of betraying her trust and tearing her family apart. It was a heartbreaking moment, one that left me reeling with shock and disbelief. I tried to respond, to plead with her to listen to reason, but she blocked my number before I could send a single word. The rejection felt like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for breath as tears streamed down my cheeks. How had it come to this? How had our once loving relationship been reduced to this toxic exchange of insults and accusations? As a mother, watching my daughter make choices that I strongly disagree with is one of the most painful experiences I have ever endured. Natalie's decision to marry Jacob, an incarcerated man with a troubled past, feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from. The thought of her committing herself to someone with such a questionable background fills me with a sense of dread and helplessness. I've tried everything to express my concerns to Natalie, to make her see the potential dangers of her choices. But she's so deeply entrenched in her relationship with Jacob that it's like talking to a brick wall. Every time I bring up my fears, she becomes defensive, lashing out at me for not supporting her decisions. It's a vicious cycle of arguments and hurt feelings that leaves both of us feeling more isolated and frustrated than ever. Now, Natalie refuses to speak to me or allow me to see my grandbaby. The thought of being cut off from them fills me with a pain that is almost unbearable. I love my daughter more than anything in this world, and the idea of losing her over this rift breaks my heart into a million pieces. I've always prided myself on being a supportive and understanding mother, but this situation has tested my limits in ways I never imagined. As much as I want to respect Natalie's autonomy and independence as an adult, I can't shake the feeling that she's making a grave mistake, one that could have devastating consequences for her and my precious grandson. I'm scared for her, terrified of what could happen if she goes through with this marriage. Jacob's past is filled with violence and criminal activity, and I can't help but fear for Natalie's safety. The thought of her being trapped in a relationship with someone who could potentially harm her fills me with a sense of dread that I can't shake. I don't know what else I can do to make Natalie see reason. I've tried talking to her, pleading with her, even begging her to reconsider her decision. But she's so blinded by love that she refuses to listen to reason. It's like she's in a whole other world, one where the dangers and risks are just a distant echo. I feel so hopeless, so powerless to change the course of events. All I want is for Natalie to be safe and happy, but it feels like an impossible task. I don't know where to turn or who to ask for help. I'm lost in a sea of uncertainty, desperately searching for a lifeline to pull me out of this nightmare. Please, if anyone out there has any advice or guidance, I'm begging you to share it with me. I can't bear the thought of losing my daughter and grandchild to a situation that seems so reckless and dangerous. I need to find a way to reach Natalie, to make her see the truth before it's too late. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. Am I the A for deciding to break up with my boyfriend after he punished my 8-year-old son by leaving him home alone? My name is Laura, a 35-year-old project manager living in a suburban neighborhood. Balancing my professional life with being a single mother to 2 energetic boys, Ethan, who is 12, and Jake, who is 8, is no easy feat. Each day starts with a whirlwind of activities. Preparing breakfast, ensuring homework is packed, and finally dropping them off at school before heading to my own demanding job. Evenings are filled with helping with school projects, managing soccer practices, and ensuring we have some quality family time despite our hectic schedules. 3 years ago, I met Mark, a 37-year-old architect, at a community charity event. Our connection was instant. We both shared a passion for our careers and a deep love for our children. Mark has 2 kids of his own, Lily, who is 11, and Max, a lively 6-year-old. As single parents navigating the complexities of work and family, we found solace and understanding in each other's company. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, often revolving around the joys and challenges of parenting, and it wasn't long before our friendship blossomed into something deeper. The early days of our relationship were marked by cautious excitement. We spent many evenings sharing stories about our children and discussing our hopes for the future. The idea of blending our families was both thrilling and daunting. We knew it would require patience, understanding, and a lot of love. For the first 2 years, we focused on strengthening our bond while slowly introducing the idea of merging our lives to our kids. A year ago, we took the significant step of introducing our children to each other. We started with casual playdates and group outings to create a comfortable environment for them. Initially, there were the expected hiccups: sibling rivalries, territorial disputes, and the occasional bout of jealousy. However, with time and consistent effort, the kids began to form their own bonds. They learned to share, compromise, and find common ground, whether it was through a game of soccer or a shared love for animated movies. As our children grew more comfortable with each other, Mark and I decided to take another step forward. For the past few months, we've been having weekend stays at my place, transforming it into a lively, bustling home filled with laughter, occasional disagreements, and lots of love. These weekends were a blend of organized activities and relaxed family time, from baking cookies together to going on nature hikes. Over the past few months, our families have been slowly integrating, with Mark and his kids spending weekends at my place. It has been a journey filled with ups and downs, but mostly, it has been a rewarding experience. The children, who were initially wary of each other, have started to bond. Ethan, my eldest, has taken to helping Max with his reading, and it warms my heart to see them sitting together on the couch, Ethan patiently guiding Max through a storybook. Jake and Lily, despite the age difference, have found common ground in their love for board games and outdoor adventures. Our weekends are now filled with the sound of children laughing, the aroma of home-cooked meals, and the sight of kids sprawled out in the living room, engrossed in a movie or a game. We've had family outings to the zoo, picnics in the park, and even a memorable camping trip where we all slept under the stars and shared stories around a campfire. One of my favorite bonding activities has been our Sunday morning pancake tradition. Each child has a role. Ethan mixes the batter, Jake sets the table, Lily slices the fruit, and Max, under careful supervision, flips the pancakes. These moments, though simple, have been instrumental in bringing us closer together, fostering a sense of unity and family. The idea for the water park trip came up during one of our family dinners. The kids were discussing their favorite summer activities, and the excitement was palpable when the suggestion of a water park was made. Mark and I exchanged glances, smiling at the enthusiasm around the table. We decided to make it a reality, setting a date and planning the details. As the day approached, the children could hardly contain their excitement. They talked incessantly about the rides they wanted to try, the snacks they planned to bring, and the fun they anticipated having. I could see how much this outing meant to them, and it made me even more determined to make it a special day. My work schedule, however, posed a small challenge. I had a few hours of work in the morning, but we figured out a plan. Mark would take the kids to the water park at noon, and I would join them as soon as I was done. It seemed like a perfect arrangement. I trusted Mark completely. He had proven time and again to be a responsible and caring partner. The night before the trip was a flurry of activity. I did the laundry, ensuring everyone had their swimsuits, towels, and extra clothes ready. The kids were buzzing with excitement, helping me pack a picnic basket with sandwiches, fruits, and drinks. Ethan and Jake took it upon themselves to gather their favorite pool toys, while Lily and Max sorted through a collection of board games and cards to bring along. I stayed up a bit later than usual, making sure everything was in order. I double-checked the weather forecast, packed sunscreen, and ensured the car was fueled up and ready to go. By the time I went to bed, I felt satisfied that we were well prepared for a fun and hassle-free day. The morning of the trip was no different. I woke up early, made breakfast, and went over the plan with Mark one last time. I reminded him of the park's address, the meeting time, and where to find the tickets I had purchased online. The kids were already dressed in their swimsuits, eagerly bouncing around the house. As I headed out the door to work, I felt a mix of excitement and reassurance. I kissed the kids goodbye, reminding them to listen to Mark and behave. I trusted Mark implicitly, believing that he would take good care of them until I could join them at the park. The anticipation of seeing their joyful faces later that day kept me going through the morning's tasks. Little did I know that this seemingly well-laid plan would soon unravel, leading to a confrontation that would test our relationship and my instincts as a mother. As I drove to work, I couldn't shake the feeling of excitement mixed with a hint of apprehension. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the joy this day was supposed to bring. The water park awaited, and I was determined to make it a memorable day for all of us. The morning at work was uneventful but busy. I completed my tasks with the usual efficiency, but my mind frequently wandered to the water park. I imagined the kids' delighted faces as they splashed around, the laughter and screams of joy echoing in the air. Mark had sent a couple of reassuring texts, confirming that everything was going smoothly. He mentioned that the kids were behaving well and were eagerly awaiting my arrival. Finally noon arrived, and I wrapped up my work quickly. I was filled with excitement as I drove towards the water park, eager to join my family and share in their fun. As I pulled into the parking lot, I scanned the area for Mark and the kids, anticipating the sight of them playing and having a great time. When I arrived at the water park and saw that Jake wasn't there, my heart skipped a beat. Panic surged through me, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My mind raced with thoughts of where he could be and why he wasn't with the rest of the children. I rushed over to Mark, my voice trembling with urgency as I demanded, "Where's Jake?" Mark's nonchalant response only fueled my anger. "He's at home with your mother," he said calmly. "He didn't put away his laundry, so he didn't earn the right to come." My initial panic transformed into a white-hot rage. How could he make such a unilateral decision about my child without consulting me? Jake was only 8 years old. This was not a punishment that fit the so-called crime. I had washed the laundry the night before, and I hadn't even told Jake to put his clothes away. The injustice of it all made my blood boil. "You left him at home for not putting away laundry? Are you serious?" Mark remained calm but firm, which only irritated me further. "Laura, he needs to learn that actions have consequences. If we don't enforce rules, how will they ever learn responsibility?" His words rang hollow to me. This wasn't about teaching responsibility, it was about overstepping boundaries and exerting authority where he had none. "You have no right to make that decision without talking to me first. You can't just punish my son like that. He's only 8, Mark." The more we talked, the more heated our exchange became. Mark dug in his heels, insisting that we needed to present a united front when it came to disciplining the kids. He argued that if we didn't show a cohesive approach, it would create a chaotic and disrespectful environment. "Laura, we need to be on the same page. If we let the kids think they can get away with not following rules, we're setting them up for failure." His words felt like a slap in the face. "But this isn't your decision to make. You can't just decide to leave my son behind without even telling me. That's not how you build trust or respect." Mark's eyes narrowed, frustration evident on his face. "So what, Laura? I'm supposed to have no say in how your kids are raised? If we're going to be a family, we need to work together." I could feel the tears of anger and frustration welling up. "This isn't working together. This is you taking over and making my child feel like he's unwanted. This isn't about responsibility, it's about you overstepping your bounds." Realizing that the argument was going nowhere and that my priority was Jake, I made a swift decision. "I'm going to get Jake. This discussion is over." I turned to Ethan and told him to get in the car. Mark's confusion and protests followed me, but I was beyond listening. I gathered our belongings with a singular focus, my heart aching for my little boy who had been unfairly left out. Mark tried to justify his actions, calling after me, "Laura, you're overreacting. We need to show the kids that we're serious about discipline." But I was done. I wasn't going to stand by and let someone else make my child feel less than he deserved. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt guilty for leaving Jake behind, even though it wasn't my decision. I was furious with Mark for overstepping his boundaries and making my son feel punished for something so minor. Most of all, I was determined to get to Jake and make sure he was okay. When we arrived home, I rushed inside to find Jake. He was sitting on the couch with my mother, looking sad and confused. I hugged him tightly, assuring him that everything was going to be okay. My mother, sensing the tension, took Ethan into the kitchen to give us some privacy. I apologized to Jake, explaining that what happened wasn't fair and that he didn't deserve to be left behind. He nodded, still looking a bit bewildered, but seemed to understand. I felt a surge of resolve as I realized that I needed to take decisive action. I called Mark and told him that our relationship was over. I couldn't trust him to respect my decisions as a parent, and I couldn't allow him to make such significant decisions about my children without consulting me. He tried to argue, but I stood firm, knowing that this was the right decision for my family. I packed up all of Mark's and his children's belongings, placing them at the end of the driveway. I sent him a text to come collect them, making it clear that he was no longer welcome in our home. Then, I locked the doors and instructed my mother not to let him in under any circumstances. To lift Jake's spirits, I decided to take him and Ethan to a different water park. We spent the rest of the day there, enjoying the rides and the sun, trying to put the morning's events behind us. The boys seemed to relax and have fun, and I felt a sense of relief knowing that I had done the right thing. That night when I went to bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. As a mother, my heart ached for my son. The guilt weighed heavily on me for allowing my anger to take control and for chasing my boyfriend, Mark, away so abruptly. My son Jake didn't deserve to be left behind, and I couldn't shake the image of his sad, confused face when I returned home to find him. I tossed and turned, thinking about how I had always strived to treat all the children fairly, often going out of my way to be gentle and considerate towards Mark's kids. Lily and Max were wonderful children, and I wanted to create a harmonious blended family where everyone felt loved and respected. However, the events of the day made it clear that Mark's approach to discipline was much harsher, especially towards my own children. It hurt to realize that he could be so strict with Jake over something as trivial as not putting away laundry, an oversight I hadn't even mentioned to Jake. I couldn't help but feel sorry for my son. He had been so excited about the trip to the water park, counting down the days with anticipation. Yet, he was left behind, punished unfairly by someone he should have been able to trust. I knew I had to stand up for him, to protect him from such harsh treatment. But as a mother, it also pained me to see the disruption and conflict this caused. As I lay there, I hoped that Mark would call or send a message to apologize, to show some remorse or understanding of why I was so upset. I wanted to believe that he cared enough to make amends, to acknowledge that his actions had hurt not only Jake but also the fragile balance we were trying to build as a family. An apology would have meant the world to me and could have opened the door to forgiveness and reconciliation. But as the hours passed, my phone remained silent. There were no calls, no messages. The absence of any effort from Mark to reach out and apologize only deepened my sense of disappointment and hurt. It made me question whether he truly understood or respected my role as a mother, or the importance of treating all our children with the same care and consideration. I replayed the day's events in my mind, trying to find some clarity amidst the turmoil. Was I right in my actions? Was I justified in ending the relationship so abruptly? I knew that my primary responsibility was to my children, to ensure their safety and well-being. Mark's harshness towards Jake had crossed a line, and I couldn't ignore that. However, the silence from Mark spoke volumes. It made me realize that perhaps he didn't see the error of his ways, or worse, he didn't care enough to make things right. I had always believed that open communication and mutual respect were the cornerstones of any successful relationship, especially in a blended family. Without these, how could we hope to build a loving and supportive environment for our children? The contrast between how I treated his children and how he treated mine was stark. I had gone out of my way to be kind and patient with Lily and Max, understanding their needs and trying to make them feel at home. I wanted them to feel as loved and valued as my own sons. But Mark's strictness with Jake showed a lack of that same empathy and understanding. It wasn't just about a difference in parenting styles. It was about fairness and respect. I questioned whether I had been too lenient, too accommodating, but deep down, I knew that my approach was rooted in love and a desire to build a positive, nurturing environment for all the kids. I believed in teaching responsibility and discipline, but not at the expense of kindness and compassion. Jake needed to feel safe and supported, not harshly judged and punished for minor infractions. As the night wore on, my resolve strengthened. I knew that I had made the right decision in standing up for Jake and ending the relationship with Mark. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was necessary. My children deserved a home where they were treated with respect and where their well-being was the top priority. If Mark couldn't understand or appreciate that, then he wasn't the right person to be a part of our lives. The next morning, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the end of a relationship that I had hoped would bring happiness and unity to our families, but relief in knowing that I had made the right choice for my children's sake. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to create a loving and supportive environment for Ethan and Jake, one where they could thrive without fear of unfair treatment. I also resolved to be more vigilant in ensuring that any future relationship I entered into would be built on mutual respect and understanding, especially when it came to parenting. My children deserve nothing less than a partner who would love and treat them as their own. In the end, the silence from Mark was a blessing in disguise. It clarified his true feelings and priorities, allowing me to move forward with a clear conscience and a strong sense of purpose. My children and their well-being would always come first, and I would continue to be the mother they needed, fiercely protective and unwavering in my love for them.